Here's my Exchange 2013 server. Now before I start, I'm going to make sure that I don't have the Microsoft anti-spam agents installed, which you won't have by default unless you've manually put them on or somebody else has. And to find out, run get transport agent, and you'll see if you've only got the 4, that's what comes out of the box with Exchange 2013. So I don't need to worry about it. If yours looks like that, then that's fine. However, if yours doesn't look like that and it has the anti-spam agents in, you might want to take them off before you deploy SPAMfighter. You don't have to. You may prefer a defense in depth and have 2 things scanning, but I don't really see the point. This is what you would see if you have all the extra bits. The anti-spam agents that Microsoft installs, what you used to get with what was an Edge transport server. To remove them, if they are on, if you just change to the scripts directory and run the uninstall anti-spam agents.ps1 script, what that'll do is it'll run through and it'll just take them off. And you just need to hit A few times to say yes to all. And open your services console, just run services.msc and restart the Microsoft Exchange transport service. Just so that takes effect. Okay, so now you would notice if I get transport agents again, I'll just have the 4 default ones that we saw originally. There we go. So if you had installed them, that's how you simply get rid of them. So download your copy of SPAMfighter Exchange module. You see, if you take a look at it, it is quite small, it's very light, it's less than 11 meg, which is pretty impressive. Run it directly on the Exchange server itself. This Exchange box is running all the roles, it's a standalone box. And the install is pretty straightforward. Any install shots that take quite some time I've sped up for the sake of the video, but it only takes a couple of minutes to install. Change your install directory should you so wish. I'm just going to leave it on its default and click next and let it install. And it will pull down all its definition updates live from the internet. What you will notice is when it gets to 100%, it takes ages. I've sped it up for the sake of the video, but it sits on 100% for quite some time. Now it needs to run as a service. It will create a user called the SPAMfighter service user. It puts that user in the local administrators group on the Exchange server, and it also puts it into the Exchange organization group. So that's quite a lot of rights assigned to that user. And the box will be ticked to run the Exchange module, which runs in a browser window. It installs itself on port TCP port 5000, so if you need to speak to it through a firewall, you'll need to punch that port open. As you can see, localhost on port 5000. When it opens up, that's what it looks like. You can also launch it from the start menu, like so. So when it comes on, that's the front page, as you can see there. The next box down is toolbars. What you can do is you can download a toolbar for both Outlook full client and for Outlook web app. On the configuration tab, you can customize some of the graphics that are in there, change the URLs where they point to, assign the user rights to change the toolbars, etc. And when you come out of there, it plonks you straight onto the services tab. So I'm just going to go back to toolbars. So if I jump across onto a client now, we can see what that toolbar software does. If we just connect to the SPAMfighter module and log in, I go to toolbars, and I'm going to download the Outlook toolbar onto this client and install it. It's very light, it doesn't take very long to install. What this does is it sets up an Outlook plugin. Accept the end user license agreement. Next. Next. And what this will do is when it launches the plugin, it will put an extra toolbar into Microsoft Outlook. So if we just minimize that and then launch Outlook on this client, you'll notice, if you are very eagle-eyed, you'll see it spinning up in the bottom of the screen. There it is. Okay, it gives you a little friendly one-off warning when you open that up. That's fine, just read and close that up, and you will notice up at the top of the screen you have an extra toolbar for SPAMfighter that gives you a block, an unblock option, and there's more options in there. They're quite straightforward. You can whitelist particular email addresses, domains, blacklist email addresses, domains, or there is a configuration button that you can go into. Obviously there's going to be very little statistics in here because this is just my test network. It's just to give you an idea of the sort of thing you can see in the plugin, change default languages, etc. Although, to be honest, all you're really going to want to be bothered with is the block, the unblock, and the white and blacklist. Now, the Outlook web app plugin doesn't get installed on the client machine. It actually gets installed on the Exchange server or the client access server that's running Outlook web app. As that's the same server that SPAMfighter is on, I'm going to install it directly upon that. Again, I've sped this up a little bit for the sake of the video. Click OK. So now if we jump back onto our client machine again and connect to Outlook web app, and log in, hopefully what we should see after a couple of seconds is SPAMfighter pops up with a block and unblock. On the config tab, that's the graphic that you can change should you so wish. If you want to use a company logo, change the URL that it points to, that's completely up to you. But obviously it's a lot simpler and a lot lighter in Outlook web app than it is in the Outlook full client. So that's the toolbars that you can deliver out to your clients. Next tab down is latest news, which is essentially just an RSS feed from the guys who make SPAMfighter. Mailboxes. There are a couple of routes to mailboxes, as you will find out. A couple of the menus point back to the same place again, but essentially you can see all the mailboxes that it can see within Exchange. You notice there's two columns on the left, the one that's ticked to saying that SPAMfighter policies are applying, and the one on the right hand side there is for the antivirus, which you'll see is turned off. There's a slightly extra charge in licensing for the antivirus, but I'll cover that in a bit. If you go to a particular mailbox, for example here's mine, you can see that spam filtering is on, the virus filtering is off, as we've already seen, and the default policy is applied. I'll come up to policies again in a minute. And I'm just a normal user, and I am in English. If I click the statistics, you won't see anything because the test network, there's nothing going in and out, so just cancel that. I would like that to go back to the menu I was on before, but I've manually got to go back in again. User filter settings. Now this pumps us straight down to policies, and it puts an exception on the policies. I know I haven't covered them, but I will come back and mention this again after we've done the policies. I can program in a particular exception to a policy for my good self or anybody else. If I want to just whitelist sender address for me, I could do that, or I could add in a particular language. If I was Chinese, for example, and I wanted to be able to accept stuff in Chinese and that's blocked on the policy, I could do that. I can search for particular users, and I've got user groups in here. Now you can create new user groups should you so wish. For example, just click the button and give my user group a name. I'm just simply going to call it group 1 for the purpose of demonstration. Have a look at the settings. You'll notice by default antivirus is turned on when you create a new group, so if you have bot licenses you might turn that off. You can click on the Active Directory tab. By default manually you have to put users in and out here. However, if you've got a decently designed Active Directory, you can specify your groups and base them on the OUs within your existing domain, which is quite handy. For example, if I wanted everybody in group 1 from the head office, I can simply do that and save changes. Yeah, there's a slight warning there about users in Active Directory. Just read the warning and click OK, and now you can see I've got 2 groups, and I can assign different policies to each of these groups if I want, which brings me rather neatly onto policies. By default it is configured to a certain extent for you, which is quite handy. There are certain filters that have been added in by default and configured for you, so once it is installed, if you want to do, you don't have to do anything at all. However, if you're like me and like to tinker with things, you can add extra filters in and tailor the policy as you so wish. So as you can see at the bottom, you can add extra filters in. You can add an IP address filter, you can add an SPF filter for sender policy framework. You can also add in DNS Blacklist filters, and you can add in the combined spam score filter. We'll take a little look at those in a wee while, one at a time, so you can see what they are should you wish to turn them on. So the filters that are turned on, the top one is antivirus, and reading across the top from left to right are essentially what it's going to do and what it's applied to. So filters on the left, and then we'll do all the other tabs one at a time. By default, antivirus is set for its sort of most non-aggressive, non-lax policy, and it's set to replace the email with safe content and attach the original in safe format. Obviously this will only apply if the antivirus box is ticked for the particular user mailbox that you want to apply that to. Sender filter is quite straightforward. Whitelist and blacklist. I can whitelist particular people's email addresses, and if you already have a big whitelist in comma delimited format or semicolon delimited format, you can import them straight in, and you can export them out if you've got big lists that you want to back up. In addition to whitelisting emails, you can also whitelist domains, and where you can whitelist stuff, adversely you can also blacklist particular emails and particular domains. The automatic whitelist feature is really cool. To be honest, I'm surprised it's not turned on by default, insofar as what it does is every time your users send an email to a particular email address, it automatically whitelists that address. So if you tick that, it will keep 10 days worth of recipient email addresses in the buffer. If something sneaks in there that you don't want to be in there, you can flush it out using that button there, but I think that's a very good feature. I'm surprised it's not turned on by default, to be honest. So I'm going to save changes because I want to keep that. Content filter is quite straightforward. You can whitelist particular phrases. It's quite self-explanatory, to be honest. By default the filter is enabled, but there's nothing in it unless you manually put something in. If you have a medical department or you're a pharmaceutical department, perhaps you want to get some emails through about Viagra, etc. Again, blacklist phrases, don't put particular keywords in there, it is warning you. Blacklisting on phrases is not very good anyway. The only sort of thing it'll defend against is congratulations, you've got a parcel, please click on the attachment, etc. That sort of thing it's pretty good for, but as it says in red at the top there, pinging particular words is not good. You can whitelist particular attachments. You can upload images, so if it sees those images in the email, it will automatically whitelist them. It's good if you've got signatures and stuff with images in. And you can blacklist particular attachments. Thankfully, this is turned off by default. I'm not a great fan of doing this. I understand why it's here. If you want to block particular file extensions, you can do so. However, obviously, I'm a techie. If you start blocking stuff like that, to me, I get upset because I can't get batch files, I can't get help files. Like CHM would have been blocked. There's loads of things on there that you might have added in INF files there for configuration for software companies and people like that. MDB at the bottom, if you've got any access developers, you're going to upset them by turning that on. So you'll have a serious think about turning this on. Thankfully, by default, it is disabled. You might want to have a look at those file extensions and pull some out if you're going to turn that on. The SPAMfighter Community Center or Community Filter uses a scoring mechanism that is taken from feedback from other SPAMfighter users, and it assigns spam scores to emails as it goes through. You can add that in. At the minute it's set for medium. I suggest you don't mess with it because it's far too complicated for me to understand, so just leave it on its default settings. Language filters. It says don't enable particular languages, and then they're all unticked, so you can add them in. Let's say if you have one user who is Italian, you can simply turn that on, or by using an exception to the filter. Okay, the ones that aren't added in by default is the IP address filter, which is quite straightforward. You can block, whitelist and blacklist particular IP addresses. It's not a particularly good method of blocking email. It's pretty easy to spoof an IP address, and this can get pretty unwieldy, which is probably why it's not added onto the default policy out of the box. You'll see, because I've added it in, it just drops it on the list. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'll add them all on so you can see them. Sender Policy Framework Filter. If you are not familiar with SPF records, I've already written an article on DNS records for email servers. It's a particular record that you can put up there that say this is my IP address, this is who I am. I'm not a fan of SPF records, to be honest, because most people don't have them, so they tend to cause more problems than they fix. Next one down is DNS Blacklist filter. Anybody who's familiar with RBL lists, it's a similar sort of thing. You can put in an IP address here of a DNS server that dynamically holds a list of non-spammers, and these are available on the internet. Go and have a search for them. And the last one is combined spam score filter, which is a little bit like the community filter, but it uses an internal algorithm and a scoring method to determine whether mails that are coming through the filters are spam or not. So you can add that in if you so wish. So those are all the filters that you can add to particular policies. Going from left to right, the next tag along is what happens when you go through those filters and your mail has been accepted. So by default, if you accept a mail, SPAMfighter will inject into the header SPAMfighter result, the fact that it's been accepted, and a variable that'll pipe in with the reason why it's been accepted, which is fair enough. You can't. There are other policy actions that you can add in. I'm not going to open all of these up. They're quite self-explanatory. I'm looking at them. You probably wouldn't want to dump emails if it was accepting them, but the option is there should you wish to do that. Block actions. What happens by default out of the box when a filter is tripped? It does the opposite. This time it will say email blocked, and it will echo in the reason into the header. But what it will also do is it will move that particular email to a SPAMfighter folder which is in the mailbox of the recipient by default. If you don't want that, you can move that to another user's mailbox. You might want to set up a spam account, and you can send all the spammed emails to that if you so wish. It has exactly the same mechanism for public folders as it does for mailboxes, which is handy considering public folders are now mailboxes in Exchange 2013, but it's exactly the same. There's contacts on there where you once again you can pipe mail that it considers to be spam to a particular mailbox. If you want to keep stuff for compliance or whatever, or you just want to check it periodically, that's where you would set that up. User filter sections. Now, we looked at this earlier when I clicked on it for a particular user and it jumped us into the screen. I said I'd come back and visit it. This is where we are now. You can set particular exceptions for a particular user. So I could set a setting for me, and if I wanted to receive messages in Chinese, then I could do that just for me. Mailbox takes us back to the same tab that we clicked on above when we clicked on mailboxes. So that's us back at policies. We've configured a policy, we've added everything we possibly can. If we wanted to create a brand new policy, you can do. You can call it whatever you so wish. I'll call it policy 1. You can choose to create a policy with default settings, which I'm going to do, or you can, if you have quite complex policies already set up, you can base the new policy on one that you've already got. And there it is there, and you can go in and edit it exactly the same as you could the default policy. You can have as many of these as you like and apply them or not apply them to whatever user groups you create in whatever granular fashion you so wish. You can make it as complicated or as simple as you like. Plugins tab just tells us a particular service is running. I'm not going to dwell in here. It says a POP3 connector service is running, the service that actually sits behind the toolbar service, and the rescan service. You're probably never going to go in there at all. Right, statistics. Obviously this is a test network, so I don't have a massive amount of email going through it, so this is not a particularly good section to look in. However, just a quick look to see what you can see. You'll notice that there is a theoretical money saved limit, how much money in time that the system thinks it is saving you. You can get it to email particular notifications on daily, weekly, monthly, whether there are updates available, important information, RSS stuff. You can have that emailed directly to you, or you can do like a weekly quarantined report and you can have them emailed to a particular email address or addresses. Everything under administration is pretty straightforward. I'm just going to click on the advanced tab, and in here you can see particular settings, services are running, default languages, etc. You can change the cache settings. Probably the only thing you come into this tab for. If you look on installation, you can see things like engine scan versions, .NET versions, etc. The sort of stuff that you'd have to give to the techies if you had a problem. This is probably where you would be coming. The one in here that you probably are going to visit, especially if you're going to pay for the product, is product keys, and you can add them in. At the minute, as you can see, I'm on eval key. I've got 90 days left. Now you are licensed by mailbox. Current price is £14.50 per mailbox for 1 year, or £29 if you get the antivirus plug-in again, and that can be bought with a 1, 2 or 3 year license. So it's reasonably cheap. And that's us done. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to come and visit us, www.paintnowlive.com.